Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special event that we are organizing on International Day of Families to launch our new report, How is Life for Children in the Digital Age. My name is Romina. I'm the director of the OECD Center on Wellbeing, Inclusion, Sustainability and Equal Opportunity. In the report, we are providing an overview of the current state of children's lives in the digital environment across OECD countries. So today we have an event that is organized in many different segments. We're going to start with welcoming remarks by Nathalie Beras, followed by opening remarks by our Secretary General of the OECD, Mathias Cormann, followed by an intervention of Sarah El Haïry, who is the Haut Commissaire à l'Enfance from France. We will then move to the projection of the documentary Si on levait les yeux, which illustrates the topic of the day through the lived experiences of a classroom and its teacher. And after the documentary, we will continue with a panel discussion around the new OECD report, and if time allows, with a Q&A session with participants. We have a set of fantastic speakers and experts that are going to join us for the panel discussion. For those online, and we know that you are many online, please feel free to post your question throughout the event in the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will try to respond throughout the event. So with that, I'm very delighted to now give the floor to our ambassador for France, Nathalie Beras, who is ambassadrice chargée d'affaires ad intérim à la délégation de la France auprès de l'OCDE. Et je vous invite, s'il vous plaît, à...
You have the floor. Thank you, Director dear Romina, Secretary General, Sir, Minister, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is now my turn to share my pleasure in welcoming all of you today, whether you're online or in the room. I'm delighted for France to be organizing the launch of the report along with the OECD. The report is entitled How is Life for Children in the Digital Age? And this is a crucial issue for our youth, and it is crucial for this issue to be analyzed by the OECD with the support of its member states, including France, because all countries are faced with significant changes triggered by the digital age in children and families' daily lives. These tools can be used to acquire knowledge, but they also pose health risks, and I think a new path has to be created, and we are responsible from a threefold perspective. We must offer youth and children a positive experience with screens. In addition, we must make sure that this experience is age appropriate and fit for their development stages, and we must protect the most vulnerable amongst them. Today, our knowledge of screens' impacts on children is not complete, and there are lively debates about these issues, and I think data should be analyzed, research should be fostered, experience should be shared. Children's experiences, academics, families, specialists, and policymakers should all be consulted. In light of the complexity of the issue we are dealing with today, only a joint action will produce data, evidence, so as to support youth so that they can make the most of digital opportunities while engaging in an offline life. The OECD is known for fostering a dialogue amongst countries and creating comparative data amongst countries to offer best practices, and in this regard the OECD's contribution is crucial. France will come up with proposals alongside the OECD, and in light of the actions already undertaken by our country. And in fact, our president said as much yesterday when he spoke to the French people. He has made the fight against social networks for the very young a priority. And this is a shared responsibility towards our youth and our children, because we know now since the pandemic that they are faced with risks and health issues, specifically mental health issues. I would like to thank Sarah El Haïry, who is High Commissioner for Children, who it's an honor for us to have you today. She has been a minister among several governments with youth, children, and families. As part of your various political commitments, you have always been committed and determined to improve young generations' daily lives. And I am looking forward to hearing you. And I would like to thank the director of WISE, Romina, as well as her colleagues for staging this dialogue. I hope they will inform our action and be the first step towards collective mobilization. I will now hand it over to our Secretary General, Mathias. You have the floor.
Merci beaucoup et bienvenue à toutes et à tous, Madame.
Microphone, please. Microphone, please.
Oh, je recommence.
Let me resume, says the Secretary General. High Commissioner Sarah El Haïry, permanent representative of France with the OECD, dear Natalie, dear colleagues, dear friends, I am delighted to welcome you to the launch of the report, How's Life for Children in the Digital Age? The report presents a wide range of data on children's digital activities and their impact on well-being to support informed policy making. Children are growing up in a world shaped by rapid digitalization, which has significant effects on their development and daily lives. Many are exposed to digital content and tools, and this is happening at an increasingly young age. By the age of 10, more than 70% of children already have a smartphone. The older they are, the more widespread the use of digital devices is in OECD countries, becoming almost universal. Across OECD countries, 96% of 15-year-olds have access to a computer at home, and 98% own a smartphone. The amount of time children spend on digital devices is striking. In most OECD countries, at least half of 15-year-olds report spending 30 hours or more per week on digital devices. Digital devices provide children with valuable tools for learning, creativity, and social interaction. For isolated or marginalized children, online platforms can help build constructive relationships and open up new opportunities. However, some digital technologies also pose new risks to children's well-being and development. 1 in 6 children aged 11 to 15 in OECD countries report having been a victim of cyberbullying, and the number of reported incidents increased by 28% on average between 2017 and 2022. Unfortunately, online sexual exploitation and abuse of children is also on the rise. Being exposed to online violence can lead to lower personal satisfaction, increased psychological distress, and depression. More generally, time spent online reduces face-to-face interactions and physical activity and worsens sleep quality. Digital technologies affect children differently. 15-year-old students from privileged socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to use digital resources for education than those from unprivileged backgrounds, with a 12% difference between the two groups. Moreover, girls are 6% more likely than boys to use digital resources for learning, with a 6% gap. Girls are also more vulnerable to the risks inherent in the use of digital media, such as depression, anxiety, loneliness, and body image problems. An international survey found that girls were significantly more likely than boys to engage in problematic social media behaviors in almost all countries considered. In addition to gender and socioeconomic factors, children's experiences in the digital environment depend on the activities they engage in online, from searching, looking for information, and browsing social networks. Children's experiences online also depend to a large extent on the environment in which they live offline. Problems at home or school can make children more vulnerable to the problematic use of digital services, while strong support systems help build their resilience to negative experiences online. Parents, teachers, and more generally carers play a key role in guiding children towards safe and rewarding practices. They too need help, as they may not have the time, the knowledge, nor the appropriate habits. Our report highlights the need for better data, include on screen exposure, digital activities, and contents, but also on the development and the evolution and cumulative effects of digitalization over the life course. The report also highlights 4 key policy pillars to effectively protect children in the digital world. Firstly, establish robust policy frameworks and promote technologies that prioritize child safety. Our analysis highlights the importance of upstream integration of safeguards into the design and functionality of digital products and services. Age verification schemes are also key to improving children's safety online. To support children in using involving technologies, the OECD guidelines for digital service providers encourage providers to provide information that is clear, understandable, simple, and age appropriate. Second, digital literacy and skills should be strengthened. This includes strengthening media literacy and developing critical thinking skills so that children are better equipped to assess information found online. Digital literacy should also be explicitly integrated into school curricula, as is the case in Canada, Denmark, Latvia, and Luxembourg. Third, providing guidance to parents and caregivers to guide children's use of digital tools. Strengthening parents' digital literacy is crucial to help them understand risks to their children's well-being in the digital environment, access remedy in case of harm, and guide children to engage in responsible practices online. Our report highlights best practices in member countries. For instance, the Ministry of Education in France created a program to raise awareness amongst parents about cyberbullying, children's privacy, and the use of digital devices in the classroom. Fourth, children's perspective should be integrated into policy making to ensure that they are responsive to their needs and that the support mechanisms are available to reflect their experiences. This includes adapting digital education to children's age and to their level of understanding, and consulting children during the design and evaluation phases of digital policies that affect them. To support policymakers in making progress on each of these pillars, the OECD is preparing a new recommendation on promoting children's well-being in times of profound change. This new instrument will complement our recommendation on children in the digital environment, last updated in 2021. This new instrument will take into account the latest developments and evidence on children's well-being in light of ongoing societal transformations and provide policy guidance and insights based on the experience and best policies of all OECD countries. To conclude, digital technologies offer a tremendous potential to support children's learning, discovery, and fulfillment. This report provides evidence-based recommendations as well as experiences from OECD countries to harness this potential while protecting children from significant and growing risks. Achieving this will require governments to both strengthen their regulatory frameworks and develop ambitious digital skills strategies. We look forward to continuing to work with our members and partners to put these policies in place and to ensure a positive and safe digital future for our children. Thank you for your attention. And I can't wait to see the film. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your opening remarks. And now I'm delighted to introduce Sarah El Haïry, who is the French High Commissioner for Childhood, and invite her to please to the podium to deliver her intervention. Thank you. It's okay. Madame l'ambassadeur.
Madam Ambassador, dear Nathalie Berras, Madam Director Romina Boarini, Secretary General, dear Mathias, Cormann, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here today to launch this report on a subject that is very dear to my heart, and this has been recalled by Nathalie. It's the consequences of the exposure of children to screens, and it's a very important subject for me because it's something that France has worked a lot on. We have really made a major effort. A number of people here in the room have worked on a report on lost time. This is something that the President of the French Republic called for. But beyond this, I was a minister in charge of youth and children. Today I'm the High Commissioner for children, but I'm also a mum. And so it's all of these different facets of my personality that mean that this is a very interesting subject. I have a very young child, 15 months old, but I also have other children around me. And so the place of devices in education is a very important subject. For example, it introduces a number of stereotypes, gender stereotypes, for example. This morning I was at a secondary school with a minister, Clara Chapaz, and we were talking about exposure to pornography in terms of consumption, but also involuntary exposure to pornography. One young person out of two raised their hand to say that they had been exposed unwittingly to pornography. So this is the reality that we're living in, and it raises so many questions and so many challenges for us as decision makers, but also as citizens and as parents. Screens are everywhere in our lives, in our professional environment, of course, in our houses. On average, we have 10 digital devices. And I didn't realize I had that many, but you think how many devices you have. A smartphone, a tablet, a second phone, which is your professional phone, the old phone that you never got thrown away, a television, and a computer, the computer of your children. And this means a lot of also passive consumption, and we haven't really paid much attention to this. So I'm not a technophobe. Not at all, far from it. I think there are wonderful opportunities, and we know these opportunities as adults, as professionals. We use devices in our working lives, in our family lives. It gives us access to medicine, to science, to culture, to leisure activities. Of course, there are huge opportunities. Even in terms of education, there are wonderful features and programs that have been specifically devised for our children. So we can't throw this out. Far from it, but it needs to be regulated. We need to regulate the activity according to the age, the needs, and the content. And it's absolutely indispensable to regulate for public health. And I weigh my words. And if I decided to come here today, it's because in your report you talk about risks, but you also mention solutions. And France has been very proactive to try to think about what we want to do with our digital society and how we can better respect children's well-being and health, because that is precisely what is at stake today with screens. We all know about the risks. There's a lot of research, scientific research, many different reports, and precisely to shore up all of this knowledge, your report really is going to play a major role. So we really need public policies because there are major risks for the health of children, in particular mental health, and Madam Ambassador, you mentioned this, and this has been one of the great priorities of France for 2025, because we can see the very negative consequences on the mental development of teenagers in particular. There's also a time dimension, because it's affecting sleep, for example. The Secretary General said it. We also see the consequences in terms of obesity. We can see that children and young people are using devices before even going to school in the morning. We can also see that it's difficult for children and young people to concentrate. The language skills development are also slower, and were actually increasing situations of inequality. The ages between birth and the age of 3 is a major, major stage in terms of development. And so this is why this is something that is so important. It's essential for the brain development of our children. And so we need to recall the importance of these very early stages that are important for the physical development, and we've seen that obesity is a major problem because of lack of physical activity. But there are other consequences. For example, in terms of eyesight, by 2050, half of a generation will be short-sighted, not for pathological reasons, but because of the use of screens. 50% of an age group will be short-sighted. And that here again, there's a lot of research, a lot of literature on the impact on eyesight of screens. Your report also indicates that the consequences go far beyond this. Many very young teenagers and children are already on the social media. They've often been exposed to harassment on social media, and the social and health consequences are huge. So we really need to make sure that we all work together, because in less than 2 years, children from 8 to 10 years old have doubled their use of social media. There are twice more children on social media, despite the fact that they shouldn't be using social media before the age of 13. So yes, we really need to regulate the social media, and we need to ban social media for young people under the age of 15 in Europe. This is the position of my government and of the President of the French Republic. As an adult, as a decision maker, as a parent, this is something that we all need to be concerned by. And of course, it's also linked to another major issue, which is harassment. That affects millions of children every year. And this is shown in your report, because this is something that affects all countries. So harassment is being carried out on social media. A lot of children are isolated. A lot of parents feel totally helpless parents try to establish rules for the use of digital devices, but the children still use their devices and very often suffer harassment. There's a documentary that raised this issue of harassment and social media. It's Adolescence, the series that has caused a lot of debate. So the use of social media for children and teenagers under the age of 15 has to be regulated. And I'm very much in favor of banning access to social media for young people. And Clara Chapaz, my colleague, is right now negotiating this approach. We, of course, need to also better protect children by providing support. There are new tools, new devices. There's artificial intelligence just around the corner. And, of course, artificial intelligence here again presents opportunities for science, for medicine. But there are also deep fakes, for instance. And the impact is going to be even more devastating for children and teenagers. In France, for example, in the north of France, there have been situations of pornography deep fakes with the face of young school children being used for pornography, and this has even led to suicides. So this is really a tragic reality, and this is why we really need to counter this threat by disseminating good practices. But more than that, we really need to go beyond the sharing of good practices. We really need to have the right tools, the right rules to protect children and teenagers. And I'm convinced that we will only manage if we can work with all of the stakeholders. First and foremost, we need to work with the parents. We need to provide more support to parents. We need to make them aware of the danger of these devices for their children. We shouldn't blame them, make them feel guilty. There are many different situations, and parents sometimes find it extremely difficult to help their children to, for example, learn without using devices. There's also a huge mental charge for some parents. So this is why we have to provide support. And I listened very carefully to your interventions, and in particular what you said about time online and offline, in particular with the more underprivileged families, because your report shows that addiction to video games, for example, which has now been recognized by the World Health Organization as an addiction proper, well, this addiction is affecting mostly the children of underprivileged families. So this is why parents have to be supported to fight an overexposure to screens. And it's also a matter of social justice. It's also a matter of equal opportunities between children. The health file that every child has in France is taking into account a number of recommendations on the daily time that children should not be, the limit of time that children should be exposed to daily, with a number of measures. We also organize workshops to support parents, and here again it's an attempt to help and support parents. But we need also to co-build a society that protects children and teenagers more. And this is why stakeholders need to work together. In particular, we need to work with the teachers and the educational community, the teachers, all the people who work with children daily and who often are the ones who hear the concerns of children. So we need to help them to limit the time spent on screens, for example, to encourage creativity of children. And a lot of schools are doing this, and the Minister of Education has a very ambitious policy to put time spent on screens on pause. And of course, beyond the trust that we place in teachers, the idea of having 10 days with no screens is something that we launched yesterday in France. It's a big project, and many schools this year are going to embark on these 10 days with no screens to show that we can spend 10 days without using any digital devices, and that this really changes the way we spend our time doing other things. Then, of course, we need to involve the children and the teenagers, and this is also my priority as High Commissioner. the issue of the overuse of devices isn't just a matter of health, of public health. It's also a question on the role of children in our society. How are we going to involve children? How are we going to listen to them? And I'm quite concerned today because of a number of no kids areas where kids are no longer welcome. This is very concerning. Children are banned from certain spaces that are no kids spaces. And I think this is a way for adults to dominate children, making them invisible in the public sphere, and that really only emphasizes the well-being and comfort of adults at the expense of children. We've seen this in the Paris metro, in trains, at the supermarket, or even in parks, where adults can just be annoyed by the movement of a child or even the voice of a child, and there's a huge social pressure on parents who are suddenly asked, to control their child and make sure that they're quiet and still. And very often this is why parents give a child a digital device, just to shut them up in a public space where they think their child is annoying other people. So we really need to think about the place of children in our societies. And we need, I think, to protect children from screens, from the algorithms. And we need to make sure that they have other activities and a society that welcomes children where they have the place in the public area. And so I try to contribute, of course, to this with my own commitments, but we can only build this society if we involve children themselves. A number of associations, local governments have established mechanisms to hear children, hear their ideas, and of course I hope that in this big house of the OECD, the place of children will also be built so that children can also contribute in their own way and also have their own opinion on the work that you're carrying out. So I think that children need to be fully involved, and it's for us adults to make the effort to listen to them and to give them a space. The Convention on the Right of the Child says this precisely. I think it's important to recall it. Last year, we celebrated the 35 years of this convention that really focuses on the needs and concerns of children. And then there's the higher interest of children. That should be our only compass, because we're taking decisions for children. But I'm convinced that building a society for children, a fairer society, needs to be thought with them and not just for them. So to conclude, because I've taken too long, I'd really like to thank you for the quality of your work, the methodology you have used that's very robust to build a society that is a better society for all children. And I think that this will really help build a better society and public policies where we take into account children and teenagers. And I'm delighted that France has also contributed in this respect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for these comments. Thank you for this one amazing intervention. It was so interesting.
Going to move on to the screening, the projection of the movie Si on levait les yeux, une classe face aux écrans. Gilles Vernet is the director of the movie, is with us today. We're going to hear from him after the movie. He's going to join our panel discussion. And he's coming from Paris, so you're not actually very far from a district, not very far from here, where you're teaching in an elementary school. And what you have chosen to do with this beautiful movie is to actually document exactly the experience of children in this new digital environment. And so you have put together this year-long journey of reflecting on the place of screens in children's lives. And so this is going to, I think, interrogate all of us on the role of parents and teachers, but also the relationship with time and nature. And the High Commissioner was also talking about that. I think the movie really illustrates those aspects in a very, very strong, I think, a meaningful manner. So we look forward to watching. So please stay with us, and we are going to now screen the movie. Thank you. well. Thank you for staying with us, to those who are here in the room and of course those that are connected online. So we're now going to start what is going to be, I think, a very lively debate around some of the images, some of the sort of words we've heard, but of course the broader sort of discussion that we're trying to have today. So you've already heard some of the results of this new report from our Secretary General, so I won't repeat that. The presence of screens and digital devices is almost universal among our children and youth. I think the statistics are very clear. We also heard, and we know from the evidence that we have collected in OECD and beyond, that the digital devices actually do bring a lot of opportunities. Learning, entertainment, accessing information, exploring new interests. I mean, it was also very clear, I think, in the movie. And also there is an opportunity for stronger connection for some, and within some groups. But there are also some risks, and we heard some of these risks, and I think the movie was actually showing that really sort of clearly. There is a very important debate, and I think this is really sort of perhaps what we're going to focus on in this very specific panel, about the nature and the relationship between lower child well-being and the problematic use of digital technology. This is a very complex relationship. We know it can go both ways. We know that some of the science here is still emerging. There are a lot of data, but perhaps this data need to be further strengthened and complemented by additional evidence, and there are different types of evidence we can think of. But we're also here today, and I like this panel in particular, to approach as a question to actually look at the solutions. This is happening now, and we understand that it's important that we take actions. It was very clear in the speech of the Secretary General, but also actually in the speech of the High Commissioner, that we really require a range of interventions. We also require an approach that really brings everyone on board, so all of society, and really so making sure that the stakeholders can actually align and work together on this. So these are the topics of the panel discussion. I'm going to first give the floor to Olivier Thévenon, who is the head of the Child Wellbeing at the OECD West Center, is also the lead author of the report we are releasing today. Before I give him the floor, I want to introduce our wonderful speakers for the panel discussion. So we have Gilles Vernet, and we have already actually introduced him. So he's the teacher that produced this beautiful movie that we just seen. We also are joined by Noa López Fernández, who is a computer engineering student at Universidad Carlos in Madrid, and a former member of the European Council for Digital Goods. We are joined today by Andrew Przybylski, who is a professor of human behavior and technology at University of Oxford. Thank you so much for being with us today, Andrew, as well. And Judit Balazs, who is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist, who is the chair of the Child Psychiatry section and board member of the European Psychiatric Association. You're also a professor at the Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest, Hungary, and in Oslo New University College in Norway. So, Olivier, je vais commencer avec toi. Et donc,
I will start with you. I'd like to hear you about the main results of our report. Thank you, Romina. The report is quite dense. Although we've created several formats to synthesize its contents, with summaries highlighting various chapters of the report. But I decided I would focus on 3 key points. The first point I'd like to stress today, and this is something we'll come back to during the panel discussion probably. The first point is that to develop realistic policies, realistic as in achievable in terms of outcomes, and for policies to be effective, meaning for several partners to try to achieve these aims rather than circumvent them, we need to assess the space held by digital devices in children's lives, and the documentary film showed us what a crucial role screens play in children's lives. We must also understand how these devices are used so as to create achievable policy aims. As this has been highlighted already by the Secretary General in his speech, digital devices are universally present, and this is something that struck us in light of the data we have for countries where data is available, which is that on average in OECD countries, 70% of children aged 10 own their own smartphone. And the share increases with age, obviously. What you see up on this slide is the time spent with digital devices, which is a crucial dimension of the problem. For 15-year-olds we have data about, it turns out that more than half of 15-year-old teenagers spend at least 30 hours with digital devices on a weekly basis. And 27% of teenagers spend more than 60 hours with digital devices, whether this be to seek help or knowledge or for leisure purposes. What you see on this screen is the triangles showing the trend whereby in OECD member countries there are recommendations such as no more than 2 hours of screen time per day for leisure purposes. And what this graph shows is that 60% teenagers age 15 spend more than 30 hours a week using digital devices. I think it is worthwhile highlighting this order of magnitude so that policy aims are achievable. Smartphones, devices cannot be banned. And when trying to promote healthy eating habits like eating fruit or vegetable, the recommendation is 3 to 5 fruits or vegetables a day because the idea is that it's achievable. Banning smartphones for 10-year-olds, I think bears the question, is this aim achievable? This is something I'd like us to discuss in light of the figures I've just shared with you. Screen time is a significant driver, and one might say that the time you spend on a screen is time taken away from face-to-face interactions, spending time with your parents, playing sports. However, not all screen times are identical. And this is something to be factored in when designing policies. And screen time is not the only driver when assessing impacts for physical, mental health, or well-being. So what are the other drivers? To briefly sum up what is to be found in the literature for, I would say, younger children, is that for younger children, research tends to show that using digital technologies, when this is active and not passive, when the technology is moderate and moderated through the engagement with an adult or parents, In such circumstances, some contents can have a positive impact from the earliest years in life. It might have positive effects for cognitive or linguistic skills, but the use has to be interactive and active by children. Another positive outcome for slightly older children would be when it comes to relations with their peers or exploring their identities, because these tools can promote access to a world that is not accessible in the real world for some children or adolescents. When it comes to teenagers, the impact of digital devices depends on the type of activity, whether you're playing video games or you're on social networks, or if you're using digital tools to seek information or content. There's a great diversity of uses, and these uses uses differ, and they depend on the type of platforms. And this is a crucial driver to be taken into consideration. There's risk in certain exposures to negative contents, and this depends on the type of use or usage. And what the literature shows, and which is probably insufficiently acknowledged as part of the policy debate, and that would be the motivation when using digital devices, for instance, social networks, because this determines what is expected of social networks. And this could lead to disappointment because your teenagers are not finding what they were seeking, or it could have a positive impact. In the specific case of social networks, what some studies show is that when social networks are used to engage in social comparison, to compare your physical appearance with that of others, it could have a negative impact because teenagers will be confronted with contents that do not reflect the real world, and this could lead to disappointment. In addition, many teenagers report using social networks to evade negative emotions, and this leads to low well-being, and our figures show that 46% of 11 to 15-year-olds amongst OECD countries report using social networks to escape negative emotions. And in these cases, teenagers do not find the comfort they were expecting from social networks. And here there's a link between the use of social networks and low well-being. There's also a trend whereby if you haven't found the comfort you were seeking on the first day you go on a social network, you will increase your consumption without ever encountering the comfort you were looking for. This leads to increased vulnerability, and family backgrounds also play a role when assessing these impacts. And what the Secretary General also said is that the uses and consequences differ according to gender. The risks are not the same. Generally speaking, boys are more prone to video game addiction. They are more prone to gaming disorders, whereas girls are more likely to be targeted by cyberbullying, and they are more likely to report negative experiences online. Thank you, Olivier, says Romina. Quite clearly, this is a highly complex issue. You mentioned some of these links and relations.
One step back, and let me start with a question of the benefits of this. I think these were highlighted as well in the conversation in the movie, but perhaps the question, I'm going to frame it like that. If each of you were to sort of do a movie, and this time the movie would mainly focus on the sort of positive inputs of technology, what would be the positive input that you would highlight? Je vais commencer par Gilles. Je vous donne la parole.
I'll start with you, Gilles. If you had to make another documentary focusing on the key benefits, which benefit would you highlight? Thank you for inviting me. Which language should I speak?
Merci pour votre invitation.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you also to the students, because when I hear them, I think I really need to thank them for all the messages they've conveyed. Now, just before I talk about the positive aspects, I'd like to underscore something that often is neglected when we analyze the impact of screens in society, and that's really important. I'm here at the OECD, so I'm going to say it. When we talk about screens, we talk about concentration, a lack of attention. It's a real impact. We also talk about, the fact that everything's easy on screens, and so you don't develop a sense of endeavor and effort. We also talk about harassment, fake news, inappropriate behavior. We talk about the impact on health, on sleep, and that's also true. But there's something that's often overlooked and that yet is so important. It's the impact of these devices on the language of children. I show this film everywhere in France, at least to launch a conversation locally so that people really discuss these issues. And what is clearly seen, and all the teachers will say it, is that the language skills are diminishing. If you look at the vocabulary of children, that they're losing the capacity to use words, to build sentences, to build arguments, to have a conversation. All the teachers say this. So why? How can we understand this? And I think it's not just a matter of looking at children and screens. I think there are two main issues here. First of all, we're talking less in the family circle, with the friends. All the time you spend on screens is time you're not spending talking to your friends, talking to your family. And it's not just the fault of the parents. It's not a matter of blaming anyone. Everybody's using these devices in the family. But we know that these devices are addictive. But there's something else, and I saw this when I was projecting this film. There's a problem with communication. The exponential growth in the use of devices, in the number of devices we use, with the social media that we use, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, we're sending thousands of messages a day. This is true for children outside the school, but it's true for the parents as well. And all this time that we're spending on screens, we're talking about 3 or 4 messages per minute sent by teenagers. All this time we spent is time that we're not speaking. So how can you learn how to speak if you don't speak? And for the very, very young children, this is a major, major issue. Yes, the day before yesterday, I was at a nursery school, and there's real concern because children are not hearing people talk. How can they develop their language skills? And the 5 first years of life are crucial for developing language skills. So this is one thing. And another thing I'd really like to underscore here, because screens are our enemy to a certain extent, because there's another thing, which is reading. Reading is essential for children, for the development of their skills, for their own personal development. There are many studies on the impact of reading on the education of children. And as a teacher, I have seen children from very difficult families, from very difficult circumstances. Sorry, Gilles, I don't want to cut you off, but there are many other people who want to talk. So I'll give you the floor later to talk about the positive aspects, because we want to hear the other speakers as well. With a microphone, please. Yes, so just the positive aspects, since that's what you asked. Well, I can't really see a positive impact for a child under the age of 5. Personally, I can't see a positive impact under the age of 5. But I think what would be positive would be to watch things on a screen with your parents, for example, if you're a child. Because then you can analyze what you're seeing, and you can have a conversation around what you're seeing on the screen, and that would be favorable for a child. Maybe some applications to learn language skills or networks later on in life when you have, for example, what used to be called a pen friend, a friend abroad, and you can exchange and develop language skills, foreign language skills. That would be positive. But under the age of 5, I mean, children already watch television. I mean, but having a child on an individual device, on an individual screen, under the age of 5, it's all negative.
The other panelists, maybe I'm going to start with you, Andrew. What is one of the sort of key benefits, or what are the ones that you want to share with us today, please?
So speaking as a researcher, I can just say that we've looked at data from the past 20 years, from millions of individuals from 168 countries, and we've examined a wide range of well-being outcomes, including social, developmental, community, and family-focused and physical health outcomes. And because this is a topic that has lots of opinions and lots of preconceived notions, we analyzed the data 33,000 different ways. And we found that in 85% of those analyses, the correlations between well-being and having access to the technologies we're talking about today were positive. In 14% of cases, there was no association, and in 0.4% of cases, the correlation was negative. And like we saw in the film earlier, the entirety of those negative correlations were if a young person had recently intensively used the internet, they were very likely to be a young woman, and the kind of well-being it was negatively associated with it was community well-being. So if a young woman at any point really did not feel like the community or the city that they lived in was one where they felt like they belonged, they were more likely to use these technologies. So I would underscore that looking at the data is tremendously important.
Thank you, Andrew. I think maybe we'll come back to this because, of course, the report that we wrote was also based, very much on the data, on the science, and I think it speaks to the complexity of the topic that some of this data are still emerging, and sometimes some of the data are actually missing some information, typically I think the ones that comes from on the ground. But of course, everything starts with data, especially at the OECD. And I think what you just highlighted, the fact that there are some vulnerabilities, some groups, it's not everywhere, but some groups and women, young women in particular, I think that resonates very strongly with our findings as well. Let me continue. I'll ask to you, Noa, what do you see as the key sort of benefits of digital devices for the children and the young people?
Well, from my own experience as a teenager online, undoubtedly, if I had to highlight a benefit, is the access to information. I have myself studied what I currently study. I am a computer scientist because I found out information online about what can I do, what I like. I feel like the internet is allowing teenagers to grow by themselves, to grow independently, to learn about their interests and develop themselves in those areas. Most of my friends wouldn't be studying what they are if it weren't for the internet, because that's where they found the information. when we are young, we usually know what 3-4 career paths. You know, a doctor, firefighter, police. That's it. Lawyer, maybe, if you are just very into it. But usually we just don't know what to do with our lives. And the internet is providing other people experiences. You know, I could meet or I could listen about other computer scientists that are girls like me, that are in my same situation, that are from my country, that are from other countries. I can access that information. I want to highlight, according to the PISA survey in 2022, 84% of 15 years old were accessing digital devices for learning things outside of schools for at least 2 hours a week, and that is positive because it highlights that kids are still curious, that kids are still willing to learn, and that digital devices are actually embracing that. They are helping them to develop their curiosity, to develop their knowledge, and to access that information. Maybe easier because now we don't have to go to the library, we don't have to look for the book, we don't have to move so much, but we are actually accessing that information, and that could be key point for societies in the future, for ourselves, for making more informed decisions, and for also developing ourselves as individuals, and however we want to do that.
Thank you so much. That was very clear. I think you expressed it very well. So access to information, but also perhaps stimulating creativity, if all of it obviously is done in the right way with the right supervision. Judit.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting me here. And I like very much how you start with the positive sides as well. And I liked very much, and congratulations to the film, to highlighting several negative sides and how to do it in a different way. I would start with a personal experience growing up in the 70s, 80s in a communist country in Hungary, and being a child and then a teenager in this time just before political changes then. And we were so lucky, my family, that both of my parents are medical doctors, and we had a phone because they had to be reached, but it was a so-called twin phone. So when we were talking, then our phone twin, maybe nobody know this construct, could not talk. So when I went home after school studying whatever, then if I wanted to communicate with any of my friends because we did not go to the Grund. So then if I phoned, then my parents stand on me and showed time, because it was extra expensive and our twin could not be phone, so they were social sensitive, my parents. And then my daughter grew up in the early 20s, in this century, early years, and there was already social media. I was so scared let her in social media. So first of all, when she wanted to go there, to Facebook, then after a long time I decided to go to Facebook to check her what it is. As a child psychiatrist, I already should have been on Facebook, but I did not dare. But because of my daughter, it was enough, motivation to join. I looked around, then I let my daughter there, and then in 2 weeks, she educated me. Mommy, it's completely stupid what you are doing. So children are always ahead of us. It's extra difficult for parents. But she used, I was amazed that she can use at home communication. There were groups, chats, fun, laugh. And it was so good that not this time with telephone. So this is one thing I really see that can be an average can include. There are groups, useful groups, just fun or information to each other. Where is the homework? We find it easily, whatever. I see so this is very personal experiences as a youth long ago or being a mother. On the other hand, if we are talking about positive things still, as a child psychiatrist doing clinical work on daily basis, before COVID already, several of my patients wanted if they traveled abroad, and they said, at least you as a clinician, we want to keep you, how to do it, or having long distances and not always able to come to visits. It's super, super nice that now, especially after COVID, when we learned how easy it can be, that we can offer help, treatment online, which is not the same that in person. So I really ask everybody, if it's possible, come to my clinic. On the other hand, if we use it useful, it's super, super helpful, and a lot of other things.
Thank you so much. So I think, this idea of perceptions of inclusivity, better personal communication, this is also something actually that we are finding in our data, and this is very clear. The young people tell you, we feel we are better communicating and communicating more. I think the tension sometimes is more whether, communication necessarily means, meaningful interaction, but I think it is true that youth really have that very strong perception. And then I think the example you shared on COVID is also very important, because indeed these technologies allow us, to do a number of things remotely, so, that helps, brings new opportunities. However, sometimes, and I imagine also depending on the very specific sort of clinical case, in present person, of course, makes a big difference. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask to Andrew now to perhaps come back a bit on the report. I'm not sure you could sort of read it all, but maybe just the highlights. So you want perhaps to comment on this. You already shared, of course, a lot of the insights from your own research, but perhaps we can come back on this very, very complex relationship between the use of digital technologies and well-being, and sort of perhaps the patterns, the findings from your side, please.
Right. So if you Google my name, you can read all of the lovely academic articles. I did try to write them clearly. I was first trained in classics, not in psychology or data science. I did my best. I think it's kind of important for everyone to appreciate, if they can, a bit of the conceptual framing here, and where this question fits in how we learn things from scientific ways of knowing. And I'll make an appeal to the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. All right? So nearly all inquiry, scientific or not, is cold porridge. Nobody particularly cares about it. It doesn't really enter into our daily lives. And commensurate with that is it's not very interesting. And so it really isn't the fodder of op-eds or popular science books or documentaries. All right? Then there is hot porridge. There's science that makes very large claims, like I've found a black hole, or this is what protons do. This does make it through the headlines, but this type of porridge, it's also accompanied by a very high level of scientific scrutiny. You need to demonstrate that your telescope works, or that your particle collider consumes the correct amount of energy, or what have you. The thing that is in this lovely report, and the thing that was in the documentary, and the thing that is in my life as a parent, and many of yours as well, is a Goldilocks topic. It attracts our attention in the way that kind of dieting fads and things like this do, but it doesn't bear any of the actual scrutiny that you would expect commensurate with that. So we'll see people talk about well-being, or attention, or mental health, but they won't give it the same serious eye that you would give if we were studying, say, cancer biology or astrophysics. I'm going to use a few examples from the report which was shared. So we've heard the word addiction a lot today, but what does that mean? Well, we might have an intuitive sense of that. As clinicians, we certainly do, but is that what's really measured? In the report, they used a series of self-report questions, either 6 or 9, I can't remember. But colleagues of mine have demonstrated repeatedly that you can't really use a questionnaire this way. It doesn't tap into the topic. In fact, using the exact same methodology, we can prove that 68% of people are addicted to their offline friends. Similarly, with screen time, we know you cannot ask anyone, a young person or someone who's older, how much time do you spend on devices, even when you use a diary. There's only a 16% overlap between what someone says they do with a digital device and what they actually do when they use it. Interestingly, that noise, 84% of what's measured when somebody fills out a PISA study or any other type of social science study, 84% of that variability, that's what correlates with reports of anxiety and depression. So what do we find when we actually look closely, when we give this high scrutiny and high attention? Well, we find that negative shifts in well-being, increased feelings of anxiety and depression, almost always precede changes in excessive technology use. There are only a handful of exceptions to that. Like we heard before, motivation is tremendously important in both young people and the framing of rules that parents give. We know that restriction doesn't work. In the same way that abstinence-only sex education doesn't work, it does not work with technology. Social media is not the dark part of the internet. The dark part of the internet is where child sexual exploitation and facilitated abuse happens. That's where there are groups that try to get people off of social media when they're discussing anorexia or self-harm into unmoderated spaces. The worst research shows us that the worst thing that you can do is make a young person choose between being honest with you as a parent, a carer, or an educator, and losing an important part of their identity and social life. Listening is tremendously important, and collecting hard data is tremendously important. But drawing conclusions based on feelings and frustrations, which I have on a daily basis, and I know we all do in some way, operating from a place of taste is not the way to make national and international health policy. We have to take this seriously.
So I think I promise you a very, very lively debate, and this is what we're having here. Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing this. I think one of the point we highlighted, very clear in this report is that, of course, the debate is still on, and there is a very long list of important studies that have been included here, and that comprises yours as well. And I think the scientific community is still debating. That's why I think we are seeing this as actually the start of the conversation, and we have, of course, the intention of doing much more. I'll some point ask to the other experts here to perhaps challenge some of what you said. I think, again, we're seeing contrasting things. Not on everything. I think what you said about the issue is, not everywhere is only with excessive use of technology. This is something that we are also saying. We're not talking about, a phenomenon that applies to everything. We're saying excessive use of technology not used in the right way. The motivation, I think this is, really strikes me as a very important factor. The issue, I would say, as a mother, is how do you build that motivation and how you make sure that the motivation stays there. So I think that's the challenge. But I think we're only kind of starting to see the tensions here. And so let me give the floor now perhaps to Judit to make your own comments on the report, but perhaps also on the points that Andrew was making. Please. Mike.
Thank you. So, and I'm sure that on purpose Andrew used the association between or correlation of excessive use. All words are very important, and on purpose, I'm sure in the report as well, these words are very, very carefully used. Yes. And that's why the issue is an issue. So we are talking about now, because in the positive side we talked about the useful use of internet and screen and whatever, which is super nice that it's in our world. I think it's no question for all of us who can use it, and but excessive use already is a problem. But what is excessive use? That's always an issue. And yes, we are talking about correlations, and that's why or associations. that's why it's important, because as a clinician, I'm talking about such people who has, for example, already pre-existing mental health issues, disorders, use disorder in the world. So what I see in my clinical practice on daily basis, I'm dealing with a lot of children and young adults. And children, I see my clinic children from 0 to 18. That's in Hungary what we define children and adolescents from 12 to 18. Let's put it that way. And I am dealing with young adulthood as well, which is a very exciting age group as well from my clinical perspective, but I think in Norway growing up. So so that's very important to think about the vulnerable groups and differentiate them from healthy young children, teenager, or so with typically developed children. And I would like to highlight here and to make an effort to protect these children, and because what we see that children with autism, ADHD, even depression and anxiety, who already has these disorders, they are much more vulnerable to this digital development or screen time. You mentioned dopamine in the film is a neurotransmitter. Actually, this really, that's the problem. What we know about these neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD, these children look for, because they don't have enough dopamine, and they look for all impulses, and that's very dangerous with this technology, that these children has an extra sensitivity to be addicted, but they don't have ADHD because of the devices, but because of ADHD they have a issue, and that's very important to know and to handle this issue, and that's one thing, and I could talk a lot about it, and with depression, anxiety. But one other thing what I would like to highlight, parents, because I would like to handle handle parents in a very sensitive way, because anyway, it's challenging to be a good or enough good parent. We all know who do it, who are teachers and communicate with parents or professionals or clinicians. I think it's a very challenging, wonderful job. However, if we have a child who has any issues, somatic or mental health issues, that's even more challenging to be a parent. And blaming the parent, I really would take it very carefully. And having a child with ADHD, it's even more challenging. And all my parents in my clinic suffer with this issue. Extra, hot topic.
Indeed, I think we are saying very clear in the report that offline and online vulnerabilities and risks reinforce each other, so that's very clear. I'm going to give the floor to Gilles. Peut-être vous avez des commentaires également.
Perhaps you have comments about this specifically?
No, the key point is you remember there was a study of internal study of Instagram showing that 30% of young women had issues like depression. Something that is really not raised, and I'm amazed about that, is that the power of the firms we are dealing with. They have huge persuasive technologies. They build algorithms that are super strong. Adults cannot often resist them, and so therefore it's really dangerous. Like you said, a child is fragile. A young child is fragile. You have to protect. After you can introduce this, but we have to point out the addiction, the dimension that is a will of these companies. So we cannot avoid this because that's the reason of excess. Why do we use it with excess? Is because of communication. This is, as I said, the guilt of nobody. Everybody wants to communicate, but we spend a lot of time doing it on the social network, but also the algorithm and this what you're scrolling that is really attracting, very strong. So I think the idea is to protect and in a way I will really I agree with you. The key point is education. I don't believe really in to forbid things, interdiction. No, I'm not sure it will work. Except that we need to find a way to protect the young. How can we be sure that a 6-year-old kid is not on reach a porn stuff or horrible stuff? This we must deal with. But the rest of it is education. Like we said, motivation. Motivate them towards the good aspect that there is, but motivate them also towards sports, toward reading, which is key, you know?
Thank you so much. And I'm glad actually that we're now sort of moving in the discussion towards solutions, you know, what we're going to do all about it. We have 15 minutes to go, but I want to give the floor to Noa first, whether you have any specific comments on the debate so far, on the report, you know, as a young person.
Well, as a young user of social media, I started having a phone when I was 11, and we've been talking about education, about how important it is to educate the kids, and it was also very visible in the documentary. We often, and whenever I get asked, like, what are the solutions to this problem, I always give the same answer, and it's education. When we tend to talk about education, we tend to talk about school, we tend to talk about the kids, you know, let's teach the kids how to use their phones, how to use social media, how to access digital devices, but we often forget that this education shouldn't be only aimed at them. Whenever I started learning about the problems of online devices, and whenever I read an article, I read a book, actually when I read the report, there is often said, like, teenagers and child use of these devices should be guided by adults, should be accompanied, should be the kids should be accompanied and educated by the adults. Parental controls should be educative, and it's obvious they should be. However, I want to ask ourselves maybe, how are my parents supposed to teach me how to use these devices if they don't even know how to use them themselves? I am 19, and you comment on it, Judit. I was kind of angry at my parents because I often read these books and these articles since I entered the council when I was 15, and they were always saying, like, parents should teach you, they should accompany you. And I was like, oh my God, but I am teaching them. Yeah. And I feel like it's a feeling that's affecting almost everyone my age. If you ask people my age from a similar environment, probably your kids are not on the same feeling because you are actually involved in these solutions, in these conversations. But most of average normal parents do not know how to use social media. They do not know how to use digital devices. So if you ask those children, people 18, 16 maybe, they will for sure tell you how they are the ones that are teaching their parents how to use devices. My parents, as in the same case as you, again, they created Instagram to check that what I was doing on Instagram wasn't bad. And I remember having them like, oh my God, how do I see a post here? So it got me thinking, they are not making the effort, they are not. But sometimes when we are looking for solution and when we are asking for these big entities, these big companies, and also to political leaders as well, to educate them, it cannot be that difficult for them to access that information. At times, I also ask myself, how are we? Because at times you get that answer of, just simply they have all the information online. They just have to go and look at it. They just have to go and read the reports. Reports are sometimes very difficult to read, even if you have the technical knowledge to understand them, and sometimes they might be misleading or they may be confusing if you don't know what you have to be looking for. So we should maybe help them get that information. I myself didn't get any guidance through my use of social media, nor by my parents, nor by my school, nor by absolutely anyone, but I want better for those that are coming after me. I want them to be educated. Schools can provide this education both for the kids and the parents. Parents go on meetings to schools. Why cannot we arrange those meetings for parents to also know how to use it, to know which tools are at their disposals? How are parents supposed to use parental controls if they don't know what parental controls are? How are parents supposed to identify signs of cyberbullying or harassment if they don't even know how to access that information on their own kids' web pages or on their own kids' social media accounts? Education is key, and I will always give this answer because information is actually power. And for kids to be guided through their social media or digital use, their parents should know, and their teachers, and when I say parents, I mean any adult that's surrounding them, any adults around them, they should also know for them to guide. So we often, and here in the documentary, we often think about educating kids, how this is not good, this is not how to use this social media. Well, maybe we should start teaching their parents first so that when these kids go to them and tell them, I'm having this problem, they know how to react. Because again, in my case, I found and I encountered problems online, and at times I was like, is it worth it to tell my teachers? Is it worth it to tell my parents? They don't even know how to access TikTok. How are they supposed to help me face the problems that I am encountering there if they don't know the codes, they don't know the language, they don't know the resources? So that's where the key point is, on educating the people around the kids and not only the kids.
I think we couldn't agree more. I think it's a very fair point. You need to educate the parents first without, of course, sort of blaming them or stigmatizing. But I think the point is not just, understanding the digital tools. And you are certainly right that you as a generation, I mean, you go much more quickly, you understand very, very, well how those sort of technical things work. I think here we're talking about something that is a little bit more fundamental, which is the awareness. So it's not just education, awareness of risks. And I think this is perhaps where, the older generation can help. In trying to understand the consequences that go with excessive and problematic use of digital media. I think we always want to make that nuance is not digital media per se, but engaging with them in very specific manner. But we started talking about solutions, and we heard, I think many of you agree that banning, is not the solution, although I think there were some interesting observations about age sensitivity of the measures, of the interventions, because of course we also recognize that, children obviously go through a development process, and when they're very young, obviously they are much more vulnerable. I think that's also something that clearly resonates not only with what we see in the report, but I would say even more importantly with some of the measures that countries have taken. So let's talk a little bit about the measures and the solutions. Olivier, je vais commencer avec toi.
Can we start with you, Olivier, perhaps? About policies and what's in the report? To pick up on what has been stated previously, I would say that the main point is that banning is not enough. There should be a global cross-cutting policy involving all stakeholders, starting with digital service providers. They should be protecting users through appropriate use of technology, through security devices to protect the privacy of children and users in general. They should also prevent the dissemination of inappropriate content and prevent exposure to harmful content for children, and they should also offer reporting mechanisms. They should be understandable, accessible by children, by educators, parents, and all stakeholders. The second point is education, educating children, educating teachers, parents, and giving them guidance to adopt necessary steps, and not necessarily through banning all devices. Research shows that restrictions are necessary, but they are certainly not enough. In addition, parents should challenge their own practices, which the documentary film rightly shows. This is crucial for rules to be observed in a family context. And what is crucial is for rules to be discussed as a family. And these rules should apply not only to children, but also to families as a whole. Microphone, please. There are recommendations about the use plans, if you will, of digital devices by families. In addition, older children amongst families can play a role in educating and guiding younger children in their use of devices. Policy should also be agile, because the industry is always evolving, and so there should be means to monitor these developments so as to adopt agile policies. Gilles, I'll hand it over to you because I think you have to leave us soon. Yes, I'll be showing the film to young children and their parents in a moment, so I'll have to go. To sum up, I'd like to address an issue that hasn't been raised. This is a quotation by Alain Damasio, who says that we spend hours stroking window panes, and this harms our empathy skills. This tends to cut us off from our peers, and this is particularly true of children. Love tends to suffer when screen time increases. This is actually really sad, but it's sad but true. Children report a deficit in affection and love, or time spent with their parents or sisters and brothers. Remember, one of the children in the movie was saying, I can't talk to my sister because she's always on her phone. And so affection suffers. We're in a universe made up of machines. Now AI is on the rise, and we're always running behind these developments. But machines are now faring better than we are. They do better than we do. For instance, a machine will analyze X-rays better than a doctor could. And many skills will lose out, and the one skill that will remain significant will be psycho-social skills amongst children. Those children equipped with these skills will benefit, and that will be undeniable, because these are skills that machines do not have yet. Thank you so much, says Romina. Thank you for being with us today.
Andrew, perhaps to comment on some of the solutions.
Actions from your perspective.
All right. These aren't going to be popular or pretty, but they are necessary if we don't want to just pat ourselves on the back and move on like we did with violent video games, movies, Dungeons and Dragons, silent films, jousting. We have to stop the bleeding. The leading cause of traffic accidents in the EU, UK, and US is distracted driving. 3,000 Americans are found dead with phones in their hands at the site of car accidents every year, and there's a lot of kids in those cars. The idea that your license isn't taken away in the EU if you're over the legal limit and you have a kid in the back seat is insane. The data isn't great, but something between 10 times and 100 times more children are seriously sexually abused, and that is technologically facilitated, than have all forms of childhood cancers. So we can talk about screen time, and we can talk about words, and we can talk about these things, but there really just need to be more police hired, and there need to be more licenses taken away if we care about kids and their holistic well-being. I think the frustration that we all have, there's a scientific aspect to it, but there's a resourcing aspect to it. These are gigantic companies that are collecting gigantic amounts of information on us, and they're using the data to sell ads, and we're using their tax revenue to fill potholes. If our children are important to us, I submit to you that every time the EU levels a fine against a large American tech company, that money should go directly to schools and to literacy programs. Not a penny of it should be spent on bombs. The taxes that when they pay taxes, now that they do somewhat through Ireland and the European Court, that money should be ring-fenced so that parents aren't scratching their heads at whatever the hell is invented after TikTok. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of resource. It's a lot of attention. It's a lot of time. And I mean what I say, finally, about the data actually being important. We do need to do something to protect young people and also to empower them. We make massive investments in large social scientific enterprises. We build particle colliders on the French-Swiss border to uncover how the universe works. But we have nothing like that in the EU or in the UK or in the US. And you know what? Mark Zuckerberg has already built one of these particle accelerators. TikTok already is one of these things. The idea that we're letting them use our data to sell ads, and we don't have the slightest amount of curiosity about how our kids actually use the technology is shocking. So yeah, everything that's in the report, let's do that. But come on, let's get real. If we care about kids, there are some really straightforward things, and it's a question of political will, and it's a question of being realistic. And I'm not going to sell you on this being easy. When the woman who was here earlier from the president's office, they engaged us at our institute, and they asked us for a consultation, and we had it in the books until we sent them a bunch of research on the topic of screen time. And then they said, no, thank you, because it wasn't compatible with the policies that are now in place in France.
Thank you for that. I think there are an interesting number of ideas there, and of course, as you said, I mean, I think there's a political commitment, sort of implementation is key here. Judit, I'm going to ask you the question. I think we are kind of approaching the end of the event, so I will please ask you to be, as brief as you can be. But please take the time you need to answer these questions on the solutions and interventions, please.
I think all important topics were somehow touched and relaxed, that we talked a lot about education of children, parents, who I would involve here, teachers. So what you highlighted from your side and I did from my parents' side, it's so important. I would bring here of course, companies as well. And I would bring here an example that I'm in my research, but I'm a suicidologist, and what we know that how media, and in those days we were thinking about classical media like newspapers, printed papers, but now online journalism, that how media reports suicide, about a suicide case, about an important patient's suicide, it can cause imitation effect in vulnerable people as well. And when we got enough data on it, I sit down with journalists and told them that, look, there are evidence of it, that we cannot report on suicide on that way, that you put highlight a photo there of the case, or write about details and place and whatever method of suicide. And they told me that, yeah, but we learned in the journalism school that if we want to sell more journal, if we want to make a good news, then we have to give details and more popular and photos. And we as suicidologists told them data, that how dangerous it is, and we educated them, and we arranged again and again meetings, and I understood their point and why it is there, and we had a discussion what you initiate here. Then there are data on it that the expression is that responsible suicide reporting became more and more present, and suicide case and imitation suicide actually in vulnerable groups as well, adolescents and mentally ill people, really decreased. And I think about something similar here, that we are in the beginning as well. Of course, we have to report about suicide. Of course, we have to, or we have fun to use technology, but how to do it and educate these companies. And one other, I could talk about. And I have one other issue that you mentioned, but we did not talk enough about it. And I would come back to cyberbullying and bullying and cyberbullying. And I agree with you, which is far from me, but in some cases, really zero tolerance should be highlighted, and this is the case of cyberbullying, or some groups on internet like ANA groups for anorexia patients who give ideas to each other. It's the same with suicide as well. So in some cases, really, really zero tolerance, and we have to educate again here all responsible people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for adding these very concrete examples, very useful. Noa, you're going to be the last one to speak, and I think it is important because, after all, this is about the young people. So, solutions.
Well, to conclude, I want to talk about not so much concrete solutions, but actually, for me, some of the three main calls for actions that we must make. First of all, we should be calling to political action and political will. It's been 10 years since I had, for the first time, a phone in my hands, and I definitely wasn't the first kid to have one. And yet, the advancements that have been made on protecting kids having phones have been very little. We must take action. We must start. I always said the example of cars. When cars first appeared, definitely we didn't know how to use them. We didn't know how to attack or work on the risk that they supposed, but now we have some evidence on them, and now driving is safer, and the same thing must happen with digital devices. We now know from a little bit of experience that we have in these last 10, 20 years, what are the problems associated, what are the risks, and we must start looking for actively solving them from, first of all, from the political will, because it's where the money actually comes from, essentially. Second, as a computer scientist, I think it's very important to also make a call for awareness for developers that are making these apps and that are working on these digital devices. I study computer science, and I get little to none knowledge on the ethical approaches of what we are making. It's just like we see a bunch of numbers and we see a bunch of code, and it's just funny to us, but these things are actually affecting real life, and we must be taking care of it. We as developers, and I include myself because I will eventually become one, we should take into account what are we willing to sacrifice for the sake of technology. We have to be very, very straightforward at where our boundaries are, what are we actually agreeing on making, and to think it shouldn't only be a work of going to the office and making some code. We should also think about how this will affect the people that will be using it. And that's where we should be focusing on. And finally, also, it is very important to start conversations. To society as a whole, I would like to call them for actions, for thinking. Go talk with your kids as a parent. Go as a children and talk to your parents about, I'm finding this online. Go as a parent and find the information on how these tools are working and what are the risks associated. I know, I don't actually know it first-handly because I'm not a mother yet, but I know being a parent is demanding, it's difficult, but just a little bit, we should all be on the same line. We should stop running behind the technology. We should actually be at the same level of it. We should actually understand it, and we should actually be seeking for these solutions as they appear.
On these very wise words, we shall conclude this wise event. So please read the report and thanks again. So let me please thank all the wonderful speakers today, and thank you for the great attention you pay to this important event. Thank you so much. Thank you.